It's episode 115 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Find all of the archives of the show at hankgarner.com, and while you're there, please click on the link in the right-hand sidebar to subscribe to the show. And over at iTunes, please rate the show and leave a comment. It helps other people find us. Also, in the show notes of today's show, visit our sponsors. This week, our sponsors are Ellen Campbell. If you are an author and looking for an editor, visit ellencampbell.thirdscribe.com. She'll help you make your words the very best they can be. Also this week, The White Dragon Genesis by Stefan Boltz. Find out why everyone is talking about this book. And a sneak peek for you, there's an audio version coming in the next week or so, so watch out for that. Find a link to The White Dragon Genesis in the show notes. Also, Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned is old school pulp with fresh new writing. The brand new volume, Volume 7, is out now. Also, pick up Volumes 1 through 6 or the omnibus of 1 through 6. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, the very best in throwback pulp writing. Also, if you enjoy the show, consider leaving a tip in the tip jar. Now on to our interview with Daniel Abraham. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Very excited today to have Daniel Abraham on the show. Daniel, you may know him as Daniel Abraham. You may know him as MLN Hanover, or you may know him as one half of James S.A. Corey. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Excited to have you on the show. I start every show with a variation of the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
The first thing I can remember offhand, there was an assignment we had in 5th grade. Miss Avalucia's class at Montezuma Elementary School, and we had a little writing period where we had like 5 or 10 minutes where we needed to write in our journals. And I never wrote anything, that was true. I always started writing stories, and then we got to share them with the class we wanted to. So I was doing, kind of grotesque horror stories to discuss and amuse my fellow 5th grade.
Like you do.
As one does.
Right.
And that was fun. It was good. The first time I remember reading something and having kind of my brain explode was R.C. Clarke's The 9 Billion Names of God. I think I was 12, so I was a little later than 5th grade on that one.
That's pretty deep waters to wade into at 12.
Yeah, my dad handed me a copy of a bunch of Clarke short stories, and it was awesome. It was, I got to the end of that one, and it was, better than any Twilight Zone episode ever.
Do you remember what it was about that story that just made your brain erupt?
The last sentence. That is a beautifully structured story.
Yeah.
In that way that, sometimes you get a really good story where it's not funny, but it's built like a joke. So you have all of this build up and all of this build up and all of this build up, and then the last line that reframes everything. That's one of those. And it was, I don't know how I would read right now. I'm not 12 anymore, but at the time it was amazing.
The payoff really grabbed you.
The payoff really grabbed me, and the way that it changed everything that had been in the story up till then.
I love it.
Yeah, structurally just gorgeous.
Yeah. So, what sort of things did you try to find after that? Were you? You said your dad gave you this Clarke collection. Was he one of these parents that kind of fed you things constantly?
Oh yeah, no. He read to me a lot. He read to me and my mom both just a lot, and would if he found something that was really cool, he would pass it on. And I was an omnivore. I read a lot on my own. But it was all over the spectrum too. I mean, He's also how I found Dorothy Sayers' mysteries and kind of one of my favorite books about human culture is something called Homo Ludens by a guy named Johann Huizinga, which I got from him. And when I was really young, my dad and my mom are fluent in Spanish. I'm not. But he would translate stories on the fly to me. There's a guy named Enrique Anderson Imbert, who's an Argentine writer who did these just fantastic stories, just weird, creepy, beautiful stories that my dad would read in Spanish and tell me in English that were also kind of formative that way.
That's awesome. When did you know that this was something you were going to pursue as a career?
Well, by high school, I was in a position where it was definitely on the to-do list.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as something I was going to make money at, but something I was going to do. There was a program when I was in high school called the mentorship program, where if you had something you wanted to be when you grew up, they would send you off to actually shadow somebody who did it so that you could, get all the stardust wiped off your eyes. And I wanted to be a writer. And one of the folks who was volunteering their time to the program was Fred Saberhagen. So when I was in probably when I was a junior and senior, certainly when I was a senior in high school, I would go up to Fred Saberhagen's house on Saturdays, and we would talk about the business and how to, write, how to not suck at it. And he was sort of my intro into the professional side of it. And I always, knew that was going to be part of what I was doing. I didn't know that it was going to ever be something I, succeeded at. But if you go into this gig thinking, by God, I shall write the novel and then they will all see how wonderful I am, you're kind of boned to start.
Right.
So my plan was always to, do this when I wasn't doing my day job.
Well, did you, by having that time with Mr. Saberhagen, did you get a more balanced look at the career of writing? I think, like you said, a lot of people have stardust in their eyes, and the mentorship helped kind of give people a more grounded look. Do you think that accomplished that for you?
I'm sure that helped. Yeah. I mean, I for one thing, I got to see kind of where he was and where he was living and how many books he had in print in order to support his family. And, I got to watch what the business end looked like a little bit. And I came into, I don't know how I came into the gig quite as cynically as I did, but I came in pretty clear that this was being a professional gambler. And I have to credit Fred with at least the first part of that revelation.
What was the first work that you finished? Maybe not the first one you published, but what was the first book that you set out to do and you made it all the way through to the end?
Oh, it was crappy. You really want to hear about this one?
Yes, really? Those are the best ones.
Good Lord. There was a thing I did in high school that was contemporary fantasy with kind of dark wizards and a band of friends who were standing against them, and it was clearly by somebody who had read a bunch of Robert Anton Wilson and been really impressed by it.
Right.
It's terrible. But I probably finished that one either when I was in high school or when I was just starting college.
Nice. What did you learn from writing that book that you say was terrible? What do you think that you picked from that you were able to take on to the next thing?
I think I learned a little bit about perspective and a little bit about point of view and a little bit about pacing. Not enough to make the next book good, but better. I mean, the next book was better. And I mean, there are three. I have 3 completed trunk novels and a couple uncompleted ones, just laying there as warnings and examples to those who come later to get off the path now. And and I understand. I really liked them at the time when I did them. I thought they were great. It's just looking back at them now that I understand. That was an expression of affection more than a legitimate critical take.
Yeah. So when did that change for you? When were you able to find your own voice and get through a project and say, this is me. This is not my love or affection for X or Y. This is Daniel Abraham's take on the state of things.
I don't know if that's happened yet. I don't know that I've had that experience. I have had things that got good enough that other people got enthusiastic about them too. I've gotten good enough that other people seem to enjoy reading them and occasionally give me money for them, and that's great. But I feel like I'm still in the process of learning how to do this.
Sure.
I'm still I'm looking at what I've done so far and thinking, oh, that was cool. Now, what do I want to do next? And how does this inform that? And how do I do this again? And how do you write a paragraph that doesn't suck? I forgot.
That's every writer sitting down every day.
Yeah, that's as far as I can tell, that's the gig. So,
right.
But that sort of epiphany of thinking, by God, I have arrived.
Sure.
I don't think I've done that yet. I don't think I've had that experience.
I think that's probably a great place to be, is to always be striving to one-up yourself and to find your true voice. I think that's where we all want to be.
Well, I think if I'd gotten to the point where I felt like I had really nailed it, I'd be done.
Right.
And I wouldn't do this anymore. I'd be done.
That's right. Yeah, I see that. You have written epic fantasy. You have written and published contemporary fantasy, and you have written and published kind of hard sci-fi. Those on the surface seem like disparate genres, but there's really a lot of common threads that run through what we like to term genre fiction. How do you see that all of these things tie together? And as a writer, is it easy to shift gears between those for you?
It's always been easy for me to shift gears between those. Those are just different projects. I mean, it's like it's easy for me to switch between watching different TV shows, and it's easy for me to switch between reading different books. Writing them isn't any different that way. As far as the expectations of genre, I'm still, that's still something I'm playing with a lot, and trying to wrap my head around. I mean, a lot of the tools are the same. Whether you're writing an epic fantasy or a space opera, it's good to have characters people like.
Right.
And the ways that you do that, they cross over a lot. When I was doing the urban fantasy stuff, that was interesting because it was mostly first person, which is not something I've done a lot elsewhere. So that was interesting, seeing how those tools worked. But as far as the genres, they serve kind of different sets of expectations, and they require different approaches. And that's kind of the fun of playing in more than one genre. I mean, like in epic fantasy, when I'm writing the epic fantasy stuff, my diction changes, because I'm not writing in our world or any world that has grown off of ours. And there's a kind of almost heightened diction, a kind of almost awkwardness that you put into that narrative voice to make it feel like it is exotic and from another place. When you're doing the urban fantasy, it's very colloquial, it's very talky, it's very intimate. That way, there's the distance between the narrator and the character and the reader is very small.
It feels very much right now.
Yeah, well, and it's inviting you in a way that epic fantasy kind of wants you at a little bit of a distance. I mean, if you read Tolkien-esque stuff, it's very, I mean, formal. And part of that is that it was written, decades ago, and the language has already moved on a little bit since then, and the customs of fiction have shifted. But we're all in the shadow of Tolkien, and so when you're writing something that's in the shadow of Tolkien, you wind up trying to sound just a little bit, trying to evoke just a little bit of what Tolkien was. That's not a thing for epic fantasy, or for space opera, or for contemporary fantasy, or for mystery, or for any of those others. And figuring out how to switch the dials so that you're in the right mode when you're writing a different genre is part of the stuff that I really enjoy about this. Figuring out how a crime novel narrator sounds different and chooses different words from an urban fantasy narrator.
Right. So it's finding it's sorting through the toolbox and finding which tools work for this particular story.
Yeah, and things that work well one place and fail others. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Was the Long Prince, the Long Price Quartet, was that the first series that you published?
That is the first series that I published.
Where did the idea for that first book come from?
The idea from that first book came indirectly from having a terrible deadline when I was at the Clarion West workshop. I went to Clarion West. It's a 6-week kind of boot camp for speculative fiction writers in Seattle, and I went in 1998. And it was Sunday night, and our teacher that week was Connie Willis, and she had given us an assignment. We went, we had dinner, we met Connie, and she gave us an assignment. She said, okay, start with somebody getting hit in the head. That was our assignment. And so I went back to my room. It was Sunday night. I had to have my story done by Tuesday. I had to start with somebody getting hit in the head, and I wrote the introduction to the first book in the Long Price Quartet, the introduction to A Shadow in Summer. And I thought I was done. I thought I was finished. I told my story. I was completed, I sold that story to Asimov's, and I got my check, and I was delighted with myself, and I was finished. And then a couple years, I guess, after that, I finally got an agent, and my agent asked if I had any novels that she should look at and try to sell. And I gave her my novel. She said, "Did you have any novels that are saleable?" And I said, "No, I do not." But I have this short story that people keep telling me reads like the introduction to a series. Take a look at that. And she read and she said, "Yeah, no, that's your series. Write that." And fortunately, I already had like 4,000 or 5,000 words on it because I wrote the introduction, and that was where that came from. That's how that happened.
Nice. Were you surprised that story became something so much bigger than that kernel of an idea that you began with?
Yep. No, I thought it was finished. I thought I had said what I had to say, and then it turned out there was this whole other thing that could grow off of it. And that wound up being a very different project than what I had imagined it to be when I wrote the story. Much bigger and much more complicated, and still a complete story, and still came to what I found a pretty satisfying ending. And I can see now how it was sort of implicit in the short story, but I didn't see it at the time.
Is there anything in particular that you can point to as a writer to allow you to look critically at a work and see the openings where this can grow? You said a lot of people said it reads like the introduction to something, but you felt like it was complete. How do you, as a writer, kind of change your perspective so that you can see those things that you couldn't see before.
The best tool I think there is putting it down and going and writing something else. I mean, there is nothing like having spent a month or two away from a story with your head in some other place, doing some other story, doing something, not perseverating over that one project and then coming back to it. That lets you see what's in the structure and see what the story is you actually wrote, as opposed to the one that you meant to write, the one that's in your head. You get to see the one that's actually on the page. The other thing, if you don't have that, if you don't have the time, reading it out loud is sobering. It's a terrible. I've been in critique groups on and off for my whole career, and there is I have a reputation now because of something called the Death Crit, which I've only done twice, and I will stand by. It was an appropriate and honorable thing to do both times I did it. But basically what I did was I read a section of somebody's story out loud to them. And and not like in a Donald Duck voice either, not trying to make it sound funny, just giving it the best read I could so that they could hear exactly what they have on the page. Neither of them ever came back to the group.
Oh no.
So I feel a little guilty about that, but it's such a tremendously powerful tool, being able to hear what is on the page.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
It shows up so many of the little flaws and infelicities. If you don't do it with your own work, you're missing a great trick.
Not to mention that it's the best thing you can do for your dialogue, for sure. If it doesn't sound like people talking, then your dialogue stinks.
Well, sometimes. On the other hand, if you actually listen to what people actually sound like when they actually talk, it makes terrible dialogue. I mean, every now and again when I'm in a meeting or something and I'm really, really bored and I just don't want to be there anymore, I start typing out what people are saying in my head so I can actually see it on the page. And it's like, sentence fragment, ellipsis, ellipsis, another sentence fragment. Oh, now we're going to begin another sentence. We haven't finished that first sentence yet. All right. We all sound like idiots all the time if you actually write it down.
It makes for great meetings, though, right?
Well, it gets me through. I don't know. I don't know that that's a virtue on my part too much as it.
Oh man, what kind of reception did you get for the Long Price Quartet?
Critically, it did very, very well. A lot of people who read it were quite taken by it. The sales numbers were not through the roof. It's one of those things that I think has had a longer run and a kind of a good reputation within the field without actually getting much outside the field, which is fine. I mean, I'd say it was a solid double.
Yeah,
wasn't a home run, but.
Do you feel like the fantasy has the potential to have a longer shelf life, maybe than science fiction, where things may feel outdated as technology moves past? Is fantasy isolated from some of that?
Well, fantasy does have the advantage of being in a different world.
Yeah.
And science fiction, to the degree that it embraces technology, it's rolling dice.
Yeah.
There's some great science fiction right now that's hard to read because, they're looking for a telephone to hook their modem into.
Right.
It was cutting edge at the time.
It's kind of like going back and reading the original Bourne novels that were written like in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the movies that were all made in the last 10 or 15 years. That's it. If you have that expectation, it's a very different thing.
Well, and you don't just see it. I mean, science fiction embraces technology so much it becomes a necessary thing, but it happens in other genres too. If you read Robert Parker Spencer novels,
Right.
Yeah, which war exactly it was that Spencer served in kind of shifts from Korea to Vietnam and just kind of gets vague.
Right.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
And fantasy can become dated too. It doesn't become dated because of the same sort of explicit issues.
Right.
So much as the commentary that it's making on the world shifts.
Yeah.
If you have something that is from that's talking about an issue that really speaks to the zeitgeist of the 1960s, it doesn't necessarily mean it says anything to us now.
Right. Or the 1940s or the 1920s in the case of Tolkien.
Tolkien has done quite well, though. I mean, Tolkien, I think, got into some territory that has that kind of evergreen issue. The the convenient thing for people who are trying to have their work live for long periods of time is there are parts of human nature that don't change.
Right.
And if you write a story about those, it's going to mean something to somebody 100 years from now. And really, with science fiction, even when you have something that has become dated as far as the literal content, like Blade Runner, for example. Blade Runner is going to be a good movie and an important movie 50, 80, 100 years from now, even though the date that it was set in is far in the past. 1984 still matters as a book, even though it's way past 1984. It winds up having a different relationship to history, but neither of those works is about placing a plausible and realistic argument about what history will actually be that then gets spoiled by history not going there.
Right.
They're both about humanity and the struggles that people face about authenticity and the relationship to power and things those are going to be an issue forever. They've always been an issue.
Right.
And those I think will do just fine.
I really got to know you and your work through your Dagger and Coin series, the Dagger and the Coin series.
Cool.
And loved the entire series. I'm about to start reading the final book, and just don't want it to end. But I've heard you say before, and this is not a direct quote, so feel free to correct me. But you don't have a lot of tolerance for the maybe the archetypical good versus evil stories, and that is something that we can point to where fantasy has evolved through the years, and we have more and more series now that explore the moral ambiguity and the grayness of characters, and where it's not necessarily the all good versus the all evil. Would you like to speak to that?
Sure. I absolutely wrote the Dagger and the Coin as an argument about the dangers of certainty and the liberating powers of doubt, and the ways that doubt gives you room for compassion and humanity and tolerance and openness and joy in ways that certainty, I think, closes you off from them. When you read Tolkien, the orcs always get kind of short shrift. The orcs are just bad. And it's okay to kill an orc. Now, the part where it's okay to kill an orc deserves to be questioned a lot when you start redefining orc as, Muslim or Japanese or enemy in the war, whichever war you're in. That winds up being a very dangerous story. And I think part of what you see in fantasy is the maturation of fantasy readers to seeing that there's holes in that story. There's complications in that story. There are consequences of absolutist good and evil that don't look like absolutist good. And when you look at something like Game of Thrones or Thomas Covenant or I'm trying to remember Jacqueline Carey's series that had Banereaker, I think was one of them. The idea of looking at good and evil in a much more nuanced way, looking at stuff in history in a much more nuanced way, and allowing the question of, wait a minute, are we the good guys? To come into it, I think speaks to people in a way that is less reassuring and more challenging and more, for me anyway, rewarding than, here's the protagonist, we know he's the good guy because he's the protagonist, and there's the bad guy, and we know he's the bad guy because the protagonist is fighting him. That kind of, there's a level of that. I like those stories too. I like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I knew who the good guys were all the time. I liked Scooby-Doo when I was growing up. Sure.
Right.
There's no question that Scooby-Doo is the good guy every time. Nothing against those, but I think a steady diet of them with nothing else fails to satisfy me here in my middle years. So
Sure. And I think a lot of people we turn to fantasy because we want these archetypical stories to help us make sense of the world. And do you think by having a more balanced view of the nature of good and evil, because, and I totally agree with you, but, on this rare occasion, we do come across someone who is a complete sociopath. And does it make those kinds of characters stand out more when we just don't blanket this side is good, this side is evil? Do you think by doing that you're able to highlight when real true evil rears its head?
Well, I think it makes it a whole lot easier to have some contrast. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that if you have something where it's every form of evil is all equally evil and it's complete, that makes it really hard to draw a distinction between, here's a person who has failed to pay their parking tickets, and here's a person who traffics in human slaves.
Right.
Those are different. Or here's somebody who's just a bad monkey, gonna hurt you. Here's somebody who is clearly mentally ill and dangerous, but not evil. Or you get a whole lot more range when you get a whole lot more range.
Yeah. So the Dagger and the Coin series, it is complete now?
It is done. We have turned in the final volume. We have written the last line. We're cooked.
How do you feel about having that series finished?
I'm satisfied and a little wispy. I like those characters a lot. I like that world.
Yeah.
I spent 6 or 7 years hanging out with those folks.
Right.
And that I will not see them again. It's a little sad, but I'm very happy with the story as it came out. It surprised me a little bit in exactly what it turned out to be. And I like it. That worked for me. So
you're surprised by what it turned out to be. When you began it, did you have a vision for the whole series?
When I began it, what I was really trying to do was write the most standard, center of the genre, core epic fantasy that I could write, made out of bits of pieces of things that I enjoyed. And it turned out by the end of it, and it didn't deviate a lot. I mean, the story, it's not like the plot changed. But by the end of the 5th book, I realized that what I had plotted out may be what I have to say about epic fantasy. I may have made the argument I have to make about it, about what it is and what I think about it and what it does. And I don't know that I have anything else to say about epic fantasy right now. And that was surprising. That was that I got there and thought, oh no, here's where I meant to go, and I was going to do this, and now that I'm here, I see that what I've built is not exactly what I thought I was building. Wow,
that's very interesting to hear an author say, well, I think I've said what I need to say.
Yeah, I started off the Dagger and the Coin, actually, before I had a plot, before I had characters, before I had anything, by holding a little symposium. I went up to a friend's house in Santa Fe, Melinda Snodgrass, and had Walter John Williams and S.M. Sterling and George R.R. Martin and Ian Tregillis and some other folks.
Never heard of any of them.
Right? And we spent a day talking about epic fantasy. What epic fantasy is, what its roots are, what it does, what are successful examples, what are unsuccessful examples, what honors the roots of it and what undermines the roots of it. And that was what informed all of the plotting and all of the structure and all of the creation of the story in The Dagger and the Coin. And so I was trying to think about what epic fantasy is all the way through this. And I came to my conclusion about it, which I'm not going to, I don't want to spoil the last book for you, but I have my opinion about what the root of epic fantasy is and my stance on it, and it has informed this series from the beginning, and it has made the argument I think I had to make.
Well, I will report back to you with my findings on that. And,
you will find it is perhaps a little less triumphalist than I had expected going in, but
such is life. But
Yeah.
Around the same time that you published that first Dagger and the Coin book, you also published another book called Leviathan Wakes.
Yep.
That you co-authored with Ty Frank under the name James S.A. Corey. How did that book come about, and what was it like to juggle this thing alongside the other thing?
Well, the way that started was Ty moved to town and was running a tabletop game set in the universe in the Expanse, and I was playing in it for a few sessions and realized that he had done all of the world building and had this gorgeous science fiction universe just sitting there waiting to be mined. So I went to him and said, hey, why don't we just, everything here. Why don't we just write it down, make it novel shaped, and, we'll sell it and get some beer money. And that was the whole plan. That was literally what we had in mind when we started. It was very much well, what the hell, let's do this shits and giggles kind of project. And it turned out it did very well. And it was fun, but Ty had done a lot of work with this universe. It started off as a pitch for an MMO that never went anywhere years and years ago. And then he had done it as a play-by-post game on a online forum, and he did it as a tabletop game for a few different folks. So he really spent years refining this world and refining this universe and thinking about issues within it. And I had written probably 5 or 6 novels at that point. So I had a pretty clear idea of how novels worked, or how they worked for me anyway. So we both came into the project with this, our peculiar sets of expertise that we got to then draw from the other guy. So I told Ty what I knew about, chapter length and description and plotting and information control, and he told me about the nature of the solar system and the economic system he set up and the characters that were in it and the political structures that he'd gotten and where they were calling back to in art history and real history and where they were invented. And so we both kind of got to bring something to the table. And
so did you guys start writing this together?
Yeah, actually, my original plan was that I would go over and have him tell me stuff, and I would write it down. And I wrote the first chapter. I wrote the first Holden chapter, and I showed it to him, and he said, "Yeah, that's not right. You did. I mean, it's good. You did good, but it isn't right. Let me try." And ever since then, he's written half of them, and I've written half of them. The first book, I wrote all of the Miller chapters. I wrote the first draft of all the Miller chapters, and he wrote all the Holden chapters. And what we would do is we'd plot them out together, so we knew what happened in each chapter. And then he'd write one, and I'd write the other, and then we'd swap, and I'd edit his, and he'd edit mine, and we'd put them on the back of the master document and go play some Xbox.
Nice.
And if you do that one time, if it's a 3,000-word chapter, which is pretty much what I like the best, and you do that one day a week, you're doing 6,000 words a week. It's not long before that's a book.
Right.
Most of Leviathan Wakes was written on Wednesdays. It was his day off. So, and as we've gone on, I've gotten more and more familiar with the universe, and Ty has gotten more and more of his own understanding of and approach to fiction. So we wind up not having the same kind of really well-regimented and identified roles that we had at the beginning. Yeah. But we also have a lot more stuff going on, so it works out pretty well.
Yeah. What does the name James S.A. Corey mean? Where does that come from?
Well, I have this thing about pseudonyms. The first thing that comes from is my idea that the way you write a successful book is you meet people's expectations, and that the way you meet people's expectations is you set them. And the most powerful tool you have to set somebody's expectations is who wrote the book. I mean, you pick up a Stephen King book, you kind of know what you're picking up. You pick up a Walter Mosley book, you kind of know what you're picking up. Even though actually Walter Mosley writes a whole bunch of stuff that isn't mystery. He writes a bunch of science fiction and political stuff, and he has a wide range, but he's known for mysteries, so that's what you're expecting. With every new kind of large-scale project, every new genre that I've gone into, I've picked a different pseudonym. And if you were expecting a Daniel Abraham book, if you were expecting an epic fantasy book, and you picked up Leviathan Wakes because it was Daniel Abraham and he writes epic fantasy, it would disappoint you, no matter how good it was as science fiction. The best science fiction in the world is still pretty shitty epic fantasy. So we needed to have a pseudonym. I thought we needed to have a pseudonym just to cue people to the fact that this was a new and different project, and to not have them falsely cued, falsely primed to expect something that it wasn't. And my middle name is James, and his middle name is Corey, and we wanted to have it sound like a crusty science fiction writer of the 70s who still shows up at Worldcon and sits in the back of the bar and gets drunk and talks about how shitty publishing is. So we put a couple of initials in there to make it stand out, and there it was.
I love it. This book went on to not only find critical success, but sales success, and has been made into a television series that we just got confirmation not long ago that season 2 is underway. Tell us about how that came to be.
Well, we got lucky. We won a lot of lottery tickets in a row.
Right.
We got the Mark Ferguson, Hawk Ostby, the guys who wrote the first Iron Man movie and Children of Men, were approached with the book, and they were excited by it, and they wrote a pilot script, and we got involved with a development company called Alcon Entertainment, who was looking to get into television. They'd been doing mostly features up till then, and decided to get into television, and they liked us, and we went and we shopped it around to a bunch of folks, and we shopped it to HBO and Netflix, and actually Xbox was looking at doing stuff. And we talked to the guys at Xbox. We wound up going with Sci-Fi because they were in the process of trying to rebrand themselves and kind of enter a post-Sharknado world.
Right.
And we're looking for kind of a Battlestar Galactica scale something that would say that they were back in business that way. And we were there at the right time. And we partnered up with them, and Mark and Hawk and Ty and I all got along really well, and they asked us to come be in the writing room for the show. And so for the last couple of years now, we've been 3 years. We've been going, living part-time in LA, going and working on the scripts and the season outlines, and doing the mixes with the folks from Alcon. Our showrunner, Narain Shankar, is kind of shepherding the whole thing through, and he lets us sit in on a bunch of stuff, and then go to Toronto for filming. We're actually I'm heading up there later on this month to finish the filming on season 2.
Love it. Were you happy to see this turned into a television series as opposed to a feature film?
Oh, absolutely. This would have been a terrible feature film.
Yeah.
Now, feature films have enough room in them. Well, they've got enough room in them for about a novella's worth of story.
Right.
Because you only got a couple hours. You can't.
That's right.
And this is a great big honking book.
Right.
If it was a feature film, it would have been a really truncated piece of work, just because it wouldn't all fit.
Right.
Because we have 10 hours in the first season, we got 13 hours in the second season. We have enough time to let the story take its own pace and let it unfold. And watching a season of television feels a lot more like reading a novel than watching a movie does. So I thought this was the right length, the right format for any kind of adaptation like this.
Right. And thankfully, we live in a time where television has caught up to the place that we can make these stories in the scale and in the way that does them justice.
No,
we might not have been able to do 20 years ago.
It's a great time to be doing television. It is a great time to be doing this kind of work. It's really weird because a lot of the distribution channels are shifting and changing, and that's odd. I mean, that's weird to be part of. We're coming into the age of streaming. We're leaving a lot of the old network models behind. And what that does to distribution changes what you get to do creatively, and everything is connected to everything else. So it's uncertain, and it's exciting, and it's shifting, and it's been a great adventure for me. And I think that the work that we've done with it has come out really, really, really quite well. I like the first season that's already out. I like it a lot. It's actually going to be streaming on Amazon Prime in December, starting in December. It's just been on pay-per-view or Sci-Fi up till now, but they're going to be releasing that on Amazon Prime. And the second season, I think, is going to be awesome. We've got new people coming in doing characters who are coming in from the second book now, and we kind of what we're doing and what we're about. I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with how it has come together.
That's awesome. How many books in that series are out now?
We are finishing up the edit on book 6 right now for the Expanse. Yeah, we're finishing Babylon's Ashes right now.
How many books do you foresee in the series?
There will be 9.
9.
Yeah,
that's a very definite answer.
Yeah, it's the answer, and it's definite. We had 2 different outlines for it. How many we could go? 9 books or 12, and typically we were looking at going, 12 we could do it, and it would be fun, but it would be a little fatty. And we're the cleaner version of this one. Means a little bit of kind of rejiggering of the plot in the later phases, but it winds up being cleaner and better and telling the story the way that I think we both feel is the right one to go with. We know what the ending is. We've known what the ending was of the last book since, almost certainly since we were working on the first part of the third one. And probably when we were working on book 2, but as soon as it became clear we were looking at a more than one trilogy, more than 3 books, we actually sat down and plotted out what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it and where we wanted it to end. So book 9 will be the last book, and we know what the last scene is. We know what the last line of dialogue is. We know how this all ties up.
That's excellent. And you guys have been publishing about one of those a year, haven't you?
Yes, we're running a little bit late on book 6. We've been making some TV, and it threw us off schedule.
Yeah.
But,
but you're on schedule to finish the books before the TV series.
Oh, yeah. No, there's no way they're catching up with us.
Well, yeah, that's on a lot of people's minds these days,
And I respect
so
that.
That's good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
No, we could. Well, and the TV show is not covering a book a season either. The first season of The Expanse covers probably 2/3 of the first book, and then some characters from the second book are in there doing stuff that wasn't in the books. And the second series, so the second season is picking up the tail end of book 1 and rolling into a kind of changed version of book 2, and that we can make this TV show for as long as people want to watch it.
Nice.
Nice. And still know how it comes together at the end.
That's excellent. I'm loving. I love season 1. Can't wait for season 2. And I know a lot of folks are as well. Daniel, where can people find you and follow your work and keep up with what's going on with you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, but I've also got a blog that's at www.danielabraham.com or www.the-expanse.com. They both go to the same place. And I'm on Twitter at my Twitter handle is at Abraham Hanover.
Excellent. Daniel, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come on the show. I'm going to put links to all your stuff in the show notes, and we're going to anxiously await Season 2 and recapping Season 1 on Amazon Prime this fall. Thank you, sir, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.